Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bento Coach Forthright Conversations. I want to begin actually today's session before I start to introduce you to our panel and our co-moderator and co-founder of Bento Coach, I actually want to show you an interesting video. And the reason for this video is going to be shortly shared, but I'm just sharing my screen now and actually starting with this short and quick video. Here you go. Isn't that interesting? We all tend to take great sports analogies in our day-to-day life. May I please ask you to mute yourself, mute the mics of the computers so that we can have a smooth conversation. What was that one or two team values that you saw when you saw that video? To me, I think it was trust, empowerment, faith in the team. Not only does the driver put all his trust in the team, but it also means that he's trusting his life to this team as the tires change, as the fuel is filled. The management of the team also value each member on the ground immensely. Empowering teams. Welcome to Forthright Conversations with the Bento Coach. We believe in coaching made convenient. And let me at the outset introduce you to the panelists. Sabita Prakash, Managing Director, ADM Capital, also the chair of their Investment Advisory Committee. Part of their senior leadership team, Sabita leads the company's investment efforts in South Asia. A big supporter of the work we do at the Bento Coach, Sabita is adept in relationship management and achieving delicate balance between empowering and delegating. A topic that's very close to her heart. With almost 3 decades of experience, Sabita has led multicultural teams and is known for her subtle nudges that enable and empower people. She loves music, and you can often find her humming to a tune, especially when she cooks delicate vegetarian food. Welcome to Forthright Conversations, Sabita. Thomas Kuruvilla, Managing Director, Arthur D. Little. Thomas is a member of the global board of Arthur D. Little and was responsible for restarting Arthur D. Little's operations in the Middle East. Thomas led his team with all his heart. He's known to set standards for other offices within the group. With his passion for leading through people and engagement, he's known to empower teams and create an environment of trust and commitment. Known for his friendly demeanor, Thomas can connect with anyone from any age. He's known to change the way universities look. I'm going to repeat that one. Known for his friendly demeanor, Thomas can connect with anyone from any age. He's known to change the way universities look at professors. His easy style of sharing knowledge has gone more from attendance in class, has got more attendance in class than anyone ever has. Finally, Mahesh Kanchan, CEO Del Monte Foods India. Mahesh is known for has more than 20 years of proven track record in various leadership roles in the fast-moving consumer goods industry. He has brought about meaningful transformations in the FMCG space. Mahesh comes from sales and marketing background, but wears a business hat. Known for building track record businesses and growing brands within India, Mahesh believes that continuous growth is mindset and consistent learning are the only two ways to lead and empower. An avid sports fan, Mahesh uses sports analogies while creating impactful conversations. Talk about the video today. His approach to business is very consumer-centric, and he builds his strategy not only from going to the goal, but coming from the goal. This video that we saw earlier today is actually a contribution from Mahesh, simply talking about teamwork and trust. Welcome, Mahesh. Welcome, panelists. I'm looking forward to this scintillating conversation today. And on that note, I want to read out this interesting quote to you by Marty Kagan in the book Empowered. Give teams problems to solve rather than features to build. Empower them to solve those problems in the best way they see fit. It rings a bell, doesn't it? As we build this conversation today, our intent is to create a dialogue with some insightful tips, tricks, and on how much is enough. How much shall we empower? What does it mean to empower? And how does it impact the financial well-being of an organization? An important question. Today, my intent is to challenge the leaders, dare the leaders, and understand, does it empower? Is growth impacted by empowerment? On that note, I'm going to swiftly move to the panel and ask my first question to Sabita, followed by Mahesh, and then Thomas. Welcome on board on this conversation, Sabita. In your experience as a leader, when have you been able to empower the teams most effectively? Do share some examples with our audience.
Thank you, Anjani, and thank you for the really glowing, if somewhat undeserved introduction. I have to say that I have not really benefited from the luxury of coaching, and that also made so convenient, as you guys do. So I've learned whatever I've learned by trial and error. And so I'm not very sure I have the right answers at this point. I only know what works for me, and that also only most of the time, not all the time. And so, as always, I'm always eager to hear audience views as to what worked for them. But before I directly answer your question as to when I've been able to empower teams most effectively, I would almost say that we need to define what empowerment is. Is my definition the same as yours? Is the same as Prashant or Mahesh or Thomas or anyone on this call? For me itself, I have so many different versions of empowerment. According to me, I think empowerment starts off at the very extreme basic level in terms of a supervision and reward system where there's hardly any empowerment. Identify specific tasks, how success is measured. You asked for examples. I'm sorry, I am in the investment industry, so I'll have to take examples from my industry. When we put an investment to work, identifying a company which we want to invest in, the example I would say of a supervision and reward system is telling a team member to work on a spreadsheet or work on a PowerPoint or to work on a presentation. Then when you get a little more trust in that person, which you referred to, Anjani, in your introduction, you may be going to the next level of empowerment, which is delegation. So you give a responsibility for processes, but you are still a little anxious about giving them complete trust and empowerment in the whole process. So in other words, I would call it responsibility without authority. So for example, give the team member financial analysis responsibility of a company. So you look at a company and understand the complete financial analysis, which is like a sub-module of the task that you're doing. And then you go on to empowerment, right? Where you give responsibility together with authority. In other words, you're okay with not only they're achieving the goal, but you're allowing them a way to achieve that goal. So you're giving them authority to use their own journey to arrive at the destination. That is a little higher stage of empowerment and almost true empowerment. I would then say that that's not all. It kind of goes full circle where you start consulting with your team member in a reverse empowerment case, which has happened to me many times, where my team members are better at certain things than I am. And therefore, I go to them and ask them what else we can do better in order to improve whatever we've got in terms of our vision or mission. So this is I feel, even for me as a person, or even for my team members as people, the empowerment can be of many different types. I'm not empowering all of them to the same extent. So in answer to your question, I would say The way I've been able to empower teams most effectively is in a situation where I've had people at different stages of their career, different personality types, understand what they are comfortable with best, and therefore it has to be customized, which is why I feel that empowerment is not just delegation, and it is not shirking your work and getting others to do your work. It is a lot more work, except that one has to do a different kind of task in the sense of understanding your team members, understanding what they are made of, and then deciding your empowerment techniques. Other things that I would just add on very quickly over here is that it is not enough to just trust and allow your team to get on with things. I think it is what is most important is to clearly articulate the problem statement or the challenge or whatever you're doing right now, and identify very measurable and actionable ways of measuring those outcomes and what constitutes success, so that your team and yourself, me and my team, have the same definitions of success. The other thing is to monitor this very closely and give very candid feedback and employ very immediate course correction techniques to ensure that everyone is singing from the same page. I was just taking that example of the video that you just showed. Even if one person was to slip up, what would happen to that car and the and everything being fitted to allow the driver to drive? So in other words, communication starts becoming important. And the other aspect of empowerment, how much is too much? I think what is important is to state the non-negotiable upfront and learn to live with the negotiable. So identify what you're willing to live with and allow the rest to proceed. And therefore, you need to be quite creative to allow the team members to be accountable for their solutions. But at the same time, there are certain things you hold dear to your heart. There has to be this laser sharp focus on those and allow other things to go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Sabita. I think what is important for us to take back from here, for me, was a reverse empowerment. A lot of times, that's one step we miss because we felt we've just shared and enabled. And I'm going to move with this question very, very swiftly to Mahesh. Mahesh, the experience as a leader, what have you been able to do to empower your teams?
I'll talk more in terms of examples. I mean, the first time I felt empowered was way back in 2005 when I took over the foods business at Unilever India. And I was managing a particular brand, a legacy brand that was acquired by Unilever in 93, about a 60-plus-year-old brand, typically in condiments, etc., very legacy brand. And the brand never did well. I mean, we acquired it from the UB group and was consistently making losses, was not growing, not in good financial health. So what happened as an entry-level marketing, I was not an entry-level, a mid-level marketing guy. And I still remember my boss and my mentor said, and I was just taking care of marketing. And he said, okay, now you take care, imagine you're an entrepreneur and you are not running this brand, but this is your brand. And this is your business. And I will ensure, though you're a marketer, I'll ensure everybody reports into you across cross-functional teams. Now, your job is to make this brand grow profitably, consistently, and competitively. And we were fair behind Maggie. So I'm telling it in the form of a story, so it makes it a little interesting. So for the first time for a marketer, a young guy, I just had finance, all cross-functional teams reporting into me. And we all got together and we figured out that, something, a brand acquired in 93 till 2005, not making money in a Unilever kind of a system was unheard of. 12 years not making money. So we said, let's put all our brains together. I'm not going to talk about how we did it, but it was a young team of all functions. And we said it was a small room in which we were all there living, almost days together. We used to kind of ideate, etc. And we said, the solutions are all inside. And they said, you do what you want, but turn around the brand. And we took some very big, bold decisions. Changed the look and feel of the brand, made the product superior to competition, shut down certain factories which were coming out of bad quality products, started putting monies from trade to the brand, started taking price increases like nobody's business, took some ups, and they said, even if you fail, doesn't matter, but turn around this brand. So that was the first time we felt empowered, and we literally turned around an ailing brand, which was ailing for 12 years in 2 years flat. We got the chairman's award, and that was very satisfactory because we turned it around and nobody intervened. So that was a clear case of empowerment in a highly stipulated, process-oriented company like Unilever. You're never made to think like an entrepreneur or a leader. You're always made to think like a manager. The first time it was, you said you're not a manager, you're a leader, you're an entrepreneur, go into your business and turn it around. And the brand, even if I look at it right now, maybe it's been almost 15 plus years that I've moved out of that brand. It still keeps growing consistently, profitably, and competitively. It overtook Maggi, which was a legacy brand from Nestle, and doing extremely well. So that was a classic case of empowerment. And I actually thanked my boss. He said he was the head of foods and says, you do what you want. And very few people have that courage to do that. So I think courage demonstrated at a leadership level, percolated down, where people are told you can fail. I was told consistently in every meeting, please don't be afraid of failing, take the risks, do things which people would have not done. And that was true empowerment for me. So I don't know whether I explained. The brand was Kisan, which we turned it around in Unilever.
I love the statement, fail, it doesn't matter. Just do what you need to do. And you reminded me of an example I'd shared a few days ago on social media. But I'm going to quickly move to Thomas. And Thomas, the same question coming to you. How did you, in a leadership role, your experience, and you've been able to empower teams in the most effective manner?
Thank you very much. Very nice listening to all the introductory discussions. Very, very enlightening. As Anjani mentioned, I'm now running Arthur D. Little Middle East operations. And when I started the Middle East operations, I must admit that I started like a manager, not like a leader, not empowering people. And that is the tendency I think all of us get when we start in leadership position. That's my thinking. When I look around people, that when you immediately become a manager, the immediate role is that you want to manage people because you are made a manager. But what I realized is that if you want to grow, you need to really empower people. I could feel it very clearly. And when I started the Middle East operations, we were growing like, let us say 20-25% per annum for the first few years. And in 20-25% per annum growth is not a bad growth. It is actually a good growth for consulting business. 20-25%, 30% per year growth is what we used to do. And then I felt after around 3 to 4 years, I said, no, this is not working out. I need to grow much faster. And that is when I moved into an empowerment logic. And the first step that I did, I made it a point to hire people that I definitely think are better than me. That was a criteria I had in mind. For example, I just as an input to start with, I could not clear the entrance exam to join IIM. Even though I teach in IIMs now, I could not get into IIM. I could not clear the exams. But I made it a point that whoever I'm going to hire, they should come out of IIM. They should have studied in engineering colleges that I could not get an admission. So I actually made it a point that everybody that comes into Arthur D. Little, I should have a feeling that they are much better than me, right? And then I allowed them the freedom to do whatever they want, right? And you will not believe we were able to double the size every year, right? So from a growth of 20 to 25% per year into doubling the size every year for many, many years, that happened only when you empower people, right? So I made it a point that we bring in people who are definitely much, much better and genuinely allow them to do whatever they want. Because see, if you are thinking that they are better than you telling them what to do is already a mistake, because you are first of all admitting that they are more capable than you. if you agree that somebody is better than you cannot actually tell them what to do. It is stupidity, right? Right? Because you're telling I'm bringing in people who are better than me, then you are not even capable of, you should technically believe that you're not even capable of managing them if you made it a conscious decision that they're coming in better, right? The other thing that we also did is we had a very entrepreneurial setup. When you are empowering people, entrepreneurial thinking is very, very important, right? And for an entrepreneurial setup, it also, you need to quite carefully manage the compensation. And entrepreneurial thinking means you need to have a low fixed compensation and a higher variable, right? So the combination is you bring in people that are very good. You genuinely tell them that you're free to do whatever you want, but you are responsible for the outcome. And if you're confident of the outcome, you should be willing to accept a very low fixed compensation and a higher variable. If you're not willing to accept it, it means that you're not confident of performing, even though I'm giving you the authority to do things, right? So it's a combination of bringing people whom you think that are genuinely better. If they are genuinely better, you are not capable of guiding them. You're allowing them to do what they want. At the same time, you don't have to take risk in the organization. You keep the fixed compensation on the much lower side, and the variable compensation is much higher than the industry. So they perform and they get a much higher compensation, right? And now when that is part of Arthur D. Little. When I get into teaching, right, the philosophy of teaching is that you're teaching versus co-learning, right? And when I these days, when I start teaching, it is a collective experience. I don't try to differentiate between the professor and the students. I was actually, when I was telling, and I don't know whether I should tell everything in such a public forum. The first day when I go into an MBA school, we go out from 10 o'clock in the night till 5 in the morning. I take all the students out. We go out just like colleagues and friends, and we enjoy the whole evening, so that there's no hierarchy between the professor and the students, right? So in the first night itself, we spend 5, 6, 7, 8 hours having drinks, having dinner. And it is not generally acceptable in India for a professor to take students out for a drinking session. It's not acceptable, right? So I even got a little bit of warning from the institute saying that, Thomas, you're not supposed to do this. You are supposed to be a professor. The students have to respect you. You cannot take them out. But the point is that once we had that session with the students, the classroom, there's no teacher, there's no professor-student relationship. The students are empowered to even learn. So we are not talking about an company or Arthur D. Little. We are talking about a teaching session in which the students are empowered to ask questions, to discuss things. It is not a respectful hierarchical relationship between the professor and the students. And I could very clearly see that in such a setup, the learning from the students are much, much higher. And the students themselves will agree after each and every session that the learning that they are getting from the various sessions when they are empowered is significantly much, much higher than the regular sessions that they have, right? And the last input I wanted to give is that it is also related to hiring, because I also, as I do a lot of consulting with my clients, I have noticed that you tend to pay a lot of money when you want to hire good people, and then you tell them what to do. I find it very contradictory or ridiculous, right? When you hire, you want to hire the best people and you pay them a lot of money, and then you tell them what to do. If you want to tell them what to do, you should be technically bringing in cheaper resources, because they're supposed to follow instructions. You're assuming that they don't have the brain, right? That is why you have to tell them. If you're assuming that they don't have the brain and you're going to tell them what to do, why are you spending money on them? So either you spend money, give a huge compensation, it can be fixed or variable, and allow them flexibility, or you bring in cheaper resources and you manage them. But many organizations, they bring in very good people and they manage them. I find that quite a contradiction, right? It doesn't work like that in my view. Yeah. I stop here for now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. May I please request everyone to mute, keep yourselves on mute, the mics on mute, please. It disturbs the flow of the conversation. Thank you very much. Thomas, I'm taking back 4 actually very important points from you. Keep it less hierarchical, keep it more flat, keep it more simple. I also took back saying that, if you're hiring people better than you, then empower them, like, have trust. I take back the fact that have creative compensation styles. It doesn't have to, the same compensation style in Authority Little may not be replicated anywhere else, may not be, but have creative ways of doing it so that you can engage people. And finally, hire, if you're hiring people better than you, excuse me, if you're hiring people better than you, then trust them to run the business the way you would like to. And I'm going to stick
Excellent.
with you for our next question, Thomas, because I think this kind of ties in somewhat. During difficult times, when teams are trying to gather momentum, how does one really empower them? And I want to take the most recent example of how we've moved from being in office to completely hybrid. How do you keep the engagement going?
See, the fact that I had set up the team with lot of freedom when we are going through tough times, the way we used to imagine it is saying that, guys, let us look at the current situation of what we are doing, and let us project how our business will look like in 2 to 3 years from now if we don't make any changes, right? And they come up with a situation, and they suddenly realize that if we don't make changes in 2 to 3 years from now, the setup that we are in is not acceptable. It is self-realization. Instead of telling them or painting a picture of the future or projecting from now into the future and painting a picture of how it may look like, instead of doing that, you ask the team to think for themselves how they see the future if we continue the way it is. And the team automatically realizes that you cannot continue the way it is today, right? So it is always you empower. It is a self-realization, self-projection of how the future will look like if you continue doing what you're doing. And it is a self-realization that unless you change, you are going to be doomed. Then they say, how do you want the future to look like? It is your decision, right? I'm genuinely asking them. I'm not guiding them towards a future that I want. The fact you have to see, the point is when you're empowering people, you have to be very genuine to it. You cannot be manipulating them into a future or into a decision that you want. People, I have seen many people who say that I'm really empowering them, but you're actually manipulating them by making the statement that I'm empowering them. You're actually not empowering them. You're giving an impression of empowerment, but you're manipulating them with your intelligence into something that you want. That doesn't work if you're brought in good people, intelligent people. So it is them visualizing that the future doesn't look like. It is them deciding how the future should look like, and they collectively decide. And I don't question that. Even if I disagree with their future visioning, I will tell them I disagree, but I'm not going to question it, because I also have to share my views, but I don't question or challenge it. I have a different view, but if all of you believe it should be this way, let us move in that direction. And then they start taking decisions on how they want to evolve into that future situation. So it is, everything is done by the team collectively, genuinely empowered and genuinely responsible for the outcome, and the reward also gives them good or bad rewards based on the outcome, right? And that is how it worked. And again, you will not believe, that is the time when we had the highest growth. We had the highest growth in Arthur D. Little in consulting due just immediately after COVID. And I'm talking about only 2 to 3 months of COVID. I'm not talking about the 2 years of COVID. For 2 to 3 months, we took time to understand what is happening, how is consulting going to be, and all of that. And after 2 to 3 months, we took a decision to, and that had the highest growth in the entire history of Arthur D. Little, the time immediately after COVID. Yeah. Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. I'm taking back a very important aspect here. Go back, reflect, and see how you want your future to look like. I think that defines the entirety of this question. But moving quickly to you, Sabita, with the same question. In difficult times, how do you keep the momentum of the teams? What do you do to empower them?
Yeah, I completely echo Thomas's point about having empowered your team before crisis hits, so that you can hit the ground running, so to speak, when crisis does hit. Just one added point that I'd like to make is that it's all about emotions. We are not robots, we are human beings. And it's quite natural that teams end up getting very negative and pessimistic. And there is a chance that they may all come out with decisions that are also very downside focused. So us as leaders had to be quite positive and upbeat, and talk to our teams to figure out from them as to what is the opportunity we can take out of this situation. Show them and in some cases, as Thomas mentioned, it may need some significant changes, right? Like, for instance, in the global financial crisis, I remember when the whole Lehman thing just broke out, there was days of panic. We did not know how it would affect our investments, and people were in gloom and doom, thinking they'd all lose their jobs, and portfolios would perform really badly and stuff like that. And that was when I had to point out, and I have to say that I was feeling quite similar myself, no special person or something, but it was after thinking through that I was able to point out that in the face of crisis comes opportunity, which is that we had, at that time, we had a really large research team compared to the rest of the industry. I said, this is where your research abilities come to the fore in separating the grain from the chaff. In other words, in identifying good investments and investing for the future, even if in the shorter term it looks bad, over the longer term, it could work wonders. And therefore, this is your chance in the sun to demonstrate your capabilities. So that seems to make a difference. Well, I would talk about empowerment slightly differently from a Sun Tzu approach also, for those who are interested in that approach, which is that you should be very supportive, but also maybe we can highlight what the team is missing in terms of opportunities if they refuse to play ball. Because I have had people in my team who continuously stay negative, even if I'm trying to push them towards being empowered, being positive, they are bringing the whole team down because they're very negative. So it is important to have different strokes for different folks and show them that these opportunities could be missed and go to someone else if they're not there to seize the day. And we need to find out what motivates the team, dangle it in front of them so that they are taking it up and proceeding with the rest of the team.
Sorry, just mute. I think what you said, Sabita, is absolutely spot on, and adding on to what Thomas said, emotion is such an important aspect of dealing with crisis. Absolutely. And empowering the emotion in the correct manner adds on and can leverage the whole thing. I particularly like the part when you said, find your strength and build on it, leverage it, and make it, your next step, especially during crisis. So thank you for that tip. And I'm going to come quickly to Mahesh with the same question, Mahesh. Difficult times, FMCG industry needed to get food on the table. You were working extra while everyone else was in containment. Your teams were probably producing more food than any of us were consuming. But with logistics not working, with how to get it out there, how did you empower teams, keep the momentum, keep them going?
So fortunately, we were kind of considered as essential industry, and we were allowed to operate. We didn't have any issues with the factories working, barring maybe one day across the pandemic. We were working, even our carriers, people also, we didn't send people to the market because we didn't want to put them into some kind of a safety challenge. The biggest challenge for us was, we adapted pretty well in terms of working from home. A lot of people did that. Factories had to run. So people had to go to the factory, ensure that the factories were all running. That was one challenge, to create some kind of a bubble within which the people could work within the factory. So that was one important challenge that we did. The second team was sales team had to go and take orders, and they could not go to the outlets to take orders. Some of it had to be done on the phone. But three important vectors I would kind of put it as: people, process, and technology needs to be used to pivot in any kind of challenging situation. And we had a good process in terms of manufacturing, good process in terms of sales, and more importantly, we could enable it with technology, be it taking orders on a handheld and that goes to the distributor, or giving an app to the retailer to place his order, which comes straight to the distributor. So technology played a very important role. process played a very important role, and most importantly, keeping your people in the center of it. These three things. And if you have one common thing, which is discipline, that kind of goes through all these three vectors, it actually works wonders. So that was during the pandemic. I also want to probably give one last example about challenges, how you could probably overcome it with some kind of empowerment. In one of my earlier organizations, we were in the confectionery industry, and in confectionery, as you know, in India is a low price point, low margin industry. And, in India, brands or categories are built around price points. Sometimes you move from one price to another. You may be a legacy brand, but you just get wiped off. I'll just give you an example of a wound care brand like Band-Aid from Johnson & Johnson. When it moved from a 50 paise to a 1 rupee, the category just got wiped off, just to give you a perspective. So we were in a candy, a 50 paise candy, and, the kid had change. The kid used to put the 50 paise, take the candy, and we had to take a price increase. 50 can't go to a 60, can't go to a 75, has to go to a 1, which is 2x. And we looked for case studies. We could not find anywhere you could take 100% price increase and still hang around in terms of volumes. So we said that was challenging. And we knew that if we took this decision at the home office and say, hey, you go and do it, people will not do it. So we said it had to be done because financially it was not viable to sell candies at 50 paise. So we said, let's get a cross-functional team across sales, supply chain, marketing, everybody, got them together for about a couple of days and said, hey, this is a challenge. What does it need to be done? And people unanimously said a price increase has to be taken. Now, the question was easier said than done, saying that taking a price increase is easy, but a 50 to a 1 rupee means your volumes will come tanking down. He said, now that's a challenge. We don't know what the rest of the industry would do, but we have to do it. Now tell us how to go about doing it. So believe the team actually constructed the whole plan about how do we move from a 50 to a 1. How do we connect with customers, retailers, consumers? Everything was done. And it actually went on beautifully. And it was one of the case studies where we took a 100% price increase. Sounds very simple, but for a consumer who's buying a 50p candy, moving to a rupee 1 is something unheard of. And fortunately, the rest of the industry followed as well. So that was a classic case saying that we were challenged with the situation. We could not find a solve for it. We put that situation in front of the people, said, hey, it is your business. How would you do it? They said, we have to take a price increase. And then you said, how do you go about doing it? And they constructed a plan. And when they did it, it was very easy to implement. Just 2 examples. That's it.
Thank you, Mahesh. Plan, plan, plan. Empower, empower, empower. Challenge your team to reflect and come up with the answers are the 3 top things I'm taking away from your fantastic story. Very empowering. I love how this whole panel is such a beautiful mix of finance, consulting, and FMCG, and how all these examples are just pouring in. We're getting some direct questions, which are fantastic. I'm going to hold on to those questions till the end. Audience, please continue to pour in your questions, but I'm moving directly back to Mahesh and asking him the very important question, Mahesh. In all of this experience that you had with the team of bringing them together, finding solutions, the responsibility reporting, the accountability, all of that can kind of get entangled. What is the key difference between empowering and delegation? How can a leader ensure the difference is clear in everyone's head?
See, delegation, I'm not a theoretical guy, but getting into a bit of a theory zone. Delegating is when you're clear at what has to be done, and you tell the guy saying, hey, this is, you need to do step A, B, C, go ahead and execute it. It works well in a lot of cases, especially when you go to Southeast, though I've not worked in Southeast Asia. I've heard of stories, let's say in Unilever, Philippines, etc., where it is said very clearly in some cultures, some societies, it works well, where you tell them clearly, do A, B, C, D, don't think, just go ahead and do it. And they execute it beautifully well. There are certain economies, some cultures, where they prefer such kinds. They prefer leaders to tell them exactly do boom, 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 boom. I'm not thinking, I put blinkers on, I just go and execute as said. Works well. But I've seen it in especially Indian systems. When you tell people this is what you need to do, don't give them flexibility, it sometimes doesn't work well. People don't buy into your thoughts that well. So you could set guardrails saying that, hey, these are guardrails that we have, but within the guardrails, you are empowered to do what you want to. So you may say, I'm a beverage company. You can do something else in beverage, but you can't do an alcoholic beverage. So that's a guardrail that I set up. And within the guardrails, if you tell people to go and kind of experiment, try out something new, you've got 80% there, you go and take a risk and go ahead and do it. That truly is empowerment for me. As I said, many a times you don't have solutions to a particular problem. You actually put the problem in front of the people, ask them saying that, what would you do? There was one boss particularly, don't want to name him. He was the managing director of Godrej Consumer Products when I used to work with a Godrej JV. Whenever I used to go to him and say, Mr. Mahendran, I have a problem. What do I do? So he never used to give a solution to me. He used to ask me, what would you do? So he used to make me think. And I would say maybe A, B, C. And then he used to come back saying that out of the A, B, C, where do you think is a higher probability of you winning? So you probably took your bet, and he says, go ahead and do it. Why are you asking me? So that was his style of leadership. And that was very impressive for me, and I used to go back thinking I'm highly empowered. I myself gave the solution rather than him giving a solution. So he was very good at doing that, and something, was very impressive as a leader to me. So that for me is a classic case of leaders trying to get the solutions from their team members, and they have a better buy-in when they get their own solutions.
I think what the trend that is coming out for me from pretty much every one of you as seasoned leaders is, let the team take the decision, keep them focused, keep them motivated, give them positive support, leverage your strengths, but let the team take their decisions. I think
just want to jump in here, Anjali. Yes, the team should take the decision, but you need to give them a sense of direction and a clarity of purpose. So as a leader, one needs to give a sense of direction. I mean, that should be very clear where you want to do, what you want to achieve. A kind of purpose needs to be there. And most importantly, a sense of direction. If these two are put in and clear guardrails are put in, then the team can actually go ahead and do what they want.
And in a bit of a twist, Mahesh, I love that. In a bit of a twist, I'm going to leave a reflective questions for the audience as we continue. I'm just typing the question in the chat box for the audience. This one is for you to reflect on all that has been said so far. I think this is a great question to reflect on before I move to Thomas. And the question for the audience is, when you felt empowered, what were the top 3 things that worked for you? And that is bringing me swiftly towards Thomas. Thomas, the question for you is something taking away from what Mahesh said. Remember to empower, but remember to direct as well. Identify the strengths of each culture and see what is working for them. 80-20 principle, the risk. How much of the risk can you take? So the question is, what are those blind spots that leaders and teams get stuck with when trying to empower teams?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to give a slightly different perspective to the wonderful thing that Mahesh mentioned about giving a sense of direction. I fully agree that it is good for a leader to give a sense of direction, but even there, I try to get it done by the team instead of giving a sense of direction. I attempted that, right? So even the direction also, I try to tell the team that I do have some thoughts in my mind and where Arthur-led leadership should go in the next 2 to 3 years, but let me keep quiet about it in the beginning. Let us have a very open discussion. And where do you think we should take the firm, right? I still definitely give my opinion. And I always try to get the team to even decide on the direction that they need to take. If I don't agree with it, I will still give my views, but I will still not control it, right? I'm still debating whether that is the right way to do it, but I'm experimenting on even allowing the team to decide on the direction, right, as an input. Now, on the blind spot, see what we need to really see. When you are empowering people, you really need to empower, and you cannot control them. What I have noticed is, if the soft skills of people are not good, it is actually very dangerous, right? Because if you are empowered and you're truly empowered, you should allow them to do what they want to do, right? They may be very intelligent, smart, but if the people's skills are very bad, they are not going to empower the people reporting to them. So once we got into an empowerment logic, over a period of time, I realized that if somebody's people skills are a bit weak, it destroys the whole firm because he's empowered. A person with a bad people skills and empowering him to do whatever he wants, it can destroy the whole organization because you empowered him genuinely, right? So what we did is we started having periodic 360 anonymous feedback, right? And if anybody has a negative 360 feedback, we give them a chance to correct or we really fire them. I know it is very drastic, right? Because we cannot keep people in an empowered organization even for a year. A year becomes a very long period, right? That your behavior is not good, your people skills are not good, you are not empowering your own people, you have to take him out, right? And in addition to that, while I mentioned that we keep the fixed compensation on the lower side and the variable compensation on the higher side, the variable compensation was again linked to performance, financial performance. But later on, after I realized the importance of soft skills, the 360 feedback can eliminate your bonus. So you cannot be a bad person and perform financially to get your bonus. That is a learning I had over a period of time. So what we do is we keep a very low fixed compensation. We link the variable to a financial performance because it is money at the end of it. If you don't link it to money, you don't have the source to pay the bonus because bonus is still money, right? But then it has a positive or a negative multiplier if the 360 feedback from your colleagues are not positive. And either they leave on their own because they don't get the benefit of taking a low fixed compensation because the negative feedback. So the point is the people aspect is extremely important if you want to genuinely empower people. And this is a blind spot I have seen. It was a blind spot for me also. It took 1.5 to 2 years to really understand that, right? I did not realize the importance of it till you start feeling the impact of negative behavior in an empowered setup.
Thank you, Thomas. I think what we are getting out of this conversation so far is that different strokes for different industries. And while a particular style of defining how you want to empower teams will work differently for consulting, will work differently for FMCG and as well for finance. However, the common thread in all of this is it's the teams that make the business successful. And if you can leverage that in some format, then it's something that can be taken forward. Tons of questions coming, some amazing responses coming to the question I asked you. But before we take the questions, I have one last question for Sabita. And before I do that, I have one interesting exercise for the audience. I have a question that we asked. When you felt empowered, what were the top 3 things that worked for you? And of course, some responses have come through directly, some have come through here. Here's what I would like you to do. This, for you, is a speed coaching experience. All the answers to this question in the chat box are indicative of the fact that you are seeking a leader-reportee relationship with these values. I would leave you, the audience, with this question, and I would let you reflect on how would you imbibe these 3 things of empowering your teams when you become a leader or when you are already one, if you're already one. So a speed coaching question, when you felt empowered, 3 things that worked for you, take those 3 things and make it work for you as a leader. On that note, I'm swiftly moving to Sabita. Sabita, with all of that has come through, I think empowering your team and making them responsible, accountable in order to drive the whole decision-making of how you want to see this business going forward, whether it's an entrepreneurial mindset, whether it's hiring intelligent people, whether it's leveraging the strengths like you did in case of research division that you had. What is the role of communication in empowered teams? Coming in from reporting, timelines, and all of that.
Yeah, actually, this is a very neat segue into a follow-up to Thomas's point about some people maybe not really sort of bucking up or getting into the spirit of things, and through a 360 appraisal, you figure out those weak links. They're just not improving in their communication or their personality interaction or their team spirit, etc. I think, yes, of course, there are some personality styles who may never sort of be very good in a team environment. They prefer to work alone rather than work in teams and so on. Even with these people, and I have to say, in my industry, I have found all kinds, because investment research can be a very lonely kind of a task, where you are in love with your research. You're trying to understand what makes that company tick, and you don't want to talk to anyone around you until you understood that. So it is therefore the role of the leader to figure out these types of people. It's not only industry, it's the types of people in your industry, and figure out what makes them tick. And this is why communication is so important. Supposing you're talking to someone at the very beginning stage of your career, I personally disagree a little bit with the panelists that we can empower them 100% and tell them to sort of do whatever they need to in order to achieve an objective. Yes, in spite of guardrails, some of our teams do turn around and show a lot of questions. They are quite puzzled as to what they can do. Some people turn right back and ask you questions. Some others feel a little overwhelmed or very overwhelmed, because they seem to think that they should be performing and they're not, because they've been given this kind of carte blanche, and how are they supposed to deal with it? So therefore, what I would say as a leader is figure out this person in your team and communicate accordingly. For instance, someone in a very junior position who has just joined from university and is not really used to the working atmosphere, you need to be a little more granular in your communication. Define what's expected and when you expect to get it back. They feel better with certainty. They don't do very well with uncertainty at the beginning of their career. Then as they go along, slowly train them up and validate, use key success factors, as I call it, or identify performance outcomes that they need to achieve in order to validate their performance. And once again, that is communication, identifying exactly what it is. Agree that it is difficult to identify qualitative aspects in this exercise. But I think over a period of time, in the last 5 or 10 years, with a lot of industries going towards this ESG, environmental, social governance type of measurements, people have become much more adept at making quantitative out of qualitative factors. So we need to quantify what we think are the values we need our people to show. And then when you go to empowering people towards when they become more senior, how are we recognizing their performance? How do we motivate them to continue the performance? The other thing that I've noticed in my industry is people are quite quick to tire of the mundane and the commonplace and the sameness. And so we need to provide them this kind of excitement that the next opportunity is different and even more exciting. So continuously motivating them and continuously giving them the chance to do something that breaks the barriers and identify new challenges. That's the other reason why empowerment is important, because you're allowing them to take more and more responsibility. So motivation. And ultimately, I think we talked about guardrails. I agree, guardrails are important. Maybe one way of identifying guardrails is to communicate vision and mission at all times and show the team where, or ask the team, actually, even better, as to how we can get to where we want to go. Because ultimately, I think it's the leaders and maybe the owners of the company, the shareholders of the company, who have that vision or the mission that they want take the company somewhere. So if that is more articulate or can be made more articulate, it may help to communicate it through the ranks and through the teams to help everyone pull towards the same goal.
Great thought in terms of show them the goalpost, take them to the goal if required, give them granular feedback whenever, or share them granular empowerment wherever required. Different strokes for different folks. And I think that's become pretty evident because we're representing different industries here. I myself have worked for 4 variations of industries, and I've seen, and being in HR, I've seen how each of these have actually had a different impact. Because, you know, when you're talking of hospitality, it's just a completely different kind of empowerment, how to make the customer happy. That is the empowerment. So give everything that it takes to make a customer happy. When you work for financial services, you do completely different approach. When you work for oil and gas, it's a completely different approach. So I think the fact is, empower your people with all honesty, and give them time to reflect and bring solutions to you. We have 2 minutes before we close the call today, and I want to quickly ask some of the audience questions that have come up in the chat box. Some have come directly, some have come into the communication over here. There's a question from Sunil, and this question I'm going to ask Thomas. Thomas, it's a very interesting thing. You spoke about hierarchy, and you spoke about, you know, how the organizations can be simplified. The question is hierarchical versus flat organizations. How do we see future in the organizations? If we preach flat, do we need managers?
Yes. First of all, I sincerely believe in a flat organization. See, and let me try to I'll try to keep it short. See, when we talk about hierarchy, we talk about a fixed hierarchy. And the hierarchy comes in with your designation. I am the manager. I am the vice president. I am the CEO. In Arthur D. Little, I have tried very, very hard to determine the hierarchy in the context of a discussion based on who has more content knowledge. You see, so the hierarchy in Arthur D. Little, every time we have a discussion, we cannot have a non-hierarchical discussion because you will never get to a conclusion. But the hierarchy is never dependent on the position. For example, if I'm doing an Excel analytical tool discussion, my analyst, who is technically the junior most person, is the most senior person in that discussion because I don't know the latest Excel modeling techniques. So he drives the discussion. So I still believe in hierarchy, but hierarchy is in that particular discussion on who tends to have a better content. So content and knowledge drives hierarchy, not your number of years in the company and the designation that you have. Right? And people also think that you lose control. Completely wrong. Because the moment you delegate and empower people actually never try to take control from you because they know that control can be taken anytime. So then they will not even take it. You see, so people think that you lose control. That is actually not correct. You don't even lose control, by the way. Yeah.
Very interesting. You don't lose control. Actually, hierarchy is based on the context. And I love that. Influence where it needs to be influenced.
Exactly.
And that's taking me to another question. And I'm asking the audience for 5 extra minutes. We generally wind up at 7:30, but we've got some very interesting questions there, and we want to make the effort of at least answering 2 more. So here's another question, and this one I'm going to put to Mahesh, because you spoke about, just give me a minute, I'm looking for the question. Okay, so Mahesh, you spoke about hiring, people and empowering people at the very onset if required, at the very young age if required. And how do you then turn around? What are the decisions that happen as we go along? So here's a question from Ketan Bhala, and the question is, in the past, I've hired junior and affordable employees and it's been my show, and I've decided to turn around with empowerment and hopefully genuinely. How best to start and launch this career of change, this whole culture of change, my bad. What starts would you say are the best to avoid? What should we avoid when we are trying to empower and change? I'm going to type the question here for you in the chat box so you can read it. I'm going to repeat it again. I've decided to turn around with empowerment after hiring a junior team? How best to start, launch this culture of change? What starts would you say are the best to avoid?
A slightly complex question, but I'll try to give a simple answer if I've got the question right. In terms of starting the change, I mean, I don't think there is any particular timing that you could do. I mean, you should start as early as possible. If you think the change is for good, you should. And at the end of the day, Ketan, my answer to you is you are as good as what your team is. So your performance is dependent on your team's performance. There is nothing to get scared about saying that, hey, I will get completely ruled out of the game. If Rajesh, if you could just put yourself on mute. So you need to empower as early as possible. I do believe this is my way of working. My way of working is you set the right direction. You could co-create the direction as Thomas spoke about, but set the guardrails, set the direction, and then let them go. I mean, if Anjani's talked about sports, in sports as well, you have coaches, you have captains. So they tell you how, I mean, they don't tell you how to play a game. You go and play a natural game the way you want to. But they'll tell you, this is probably what we want to chase. This is what we want to do as a team. And then it's a team who goes and plays the natural game and enjoys themselves. So that's what I would say. As far as start is concerned, do it as early as possible. I don't know if I've answered the question.
You have, and that's your style. And it's worked for you. It's been great at the very onset. You were empowered at a very young age, and you give an example of somewhere in between junior and middle management. And so therefore you've not only done that, but you also experienced it. So I think you've answered the question. The question for Ketan, I guess, to reflect on is whether it's applicable to his industry, whether it will work for him. But definitely the question was answered. I'm going to take one final question. And these are the top 3 questions that came my way. This one's for Sabita. Sabita, the question for you is from Mahima Singh. Is empowering teams only a top-down exercise? What role, if any, can other team members play in empowering teams?
Yeah, very interesting, Mahima. Thanks for that question. My thought for that, it is again a very complex, simply asked complex question, I would put it. But yes, I think everyone can play a part in empowerment. And I particularly think that the way it works is it's dependent on individual members of the team. I think we referred to it in the past. Some people like to be told what to do. They like to know what they're doing and go for it. Some others like to participate by suggesting solutions to problems. Identifying these people in the team and allowing them to in turn empower others, not necessarily in a top-down way, but in a parallel way, makes a lot of sense. Where as a team, we're all asking this question as to what is it that we can do better in order to achieve our mission, vision, and goals? And so rather than stating problems, being able to suggest solutions or offering different solutions, however mad they are. So it has to be a creative solutioning kind of environment that is encouraged by the leaders, but at the same time, the others in the team are allowed to suggest these solutions as well.
And I think 360 empowerment is something that an organization should really fuel as a culture. And Thomas has said it, a few times. Mahesh has said it a few times, and you've said it a few times, that unless we bring the team together to empower each other, we are never going to have a strong, sustainable solutions. And the example that Mahesh gave earlier of bringing the team together and raising the price of the candy was a classic example of empowering each other in a room, finding the right solutions, still taking it to the right, amount of money that you want to price it at, but making sure that it's done when the teams are empowered and they're doing it together. So thank you for that answer, Sabita. And on that note, I am with a great heavy heart, forced to bring this conversation to an end. You have been an amazing audience. And of course, our panelists have been just brilliant. There are some fantastic comments out there. We will share them with you as we go along. But do remember the speed coaching question. If there are 3 things you're looking for in a leader to empower you, then those are the three things that you need to build in yourself when you are leading teams, and empower your teams. That's what you're seeking in your subconscious. Thank you very, very much, panel. Thank you very much, audience. This has been scintillating, exciting. Watch our YouTube channel and you'll find the recording out there. Thank you for being here, and have a good evening, everyone.